Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and happy to have all of you today. I am Antoine Colson, CEO at IPEM, the leading conference in European private markets. And we are very happy to support the organization of today's virtual event, and especially of these N.Darnaud Awards that are just after, right after this panel, and that will reward the best academic papers on private equity in the field of private equity this year. Private equity is a fast and constant changing industry, and fund managers as well as institutional investors are increasingly sophisticated. So it's good to see that research keeps up the pace. One aspect for which private equity is regularly praised is that they are the best-in-class acquirer. Most research covered this topic already. There was one notable paper this year by some academics from the University of Rotterdam that I encourage you to take a look at. But it's also good to discuss this with actual practitioners, with actual experts. And I'm glad to have here today three of them, starting with you, N.McDougall. Hi.
Hi there. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Neil. So Neil, you're the chairman of Silverfleet. You've been the firm's managing partner from 2004 until 2019. Silverfleet has a very strong buy and build track record, both in the UK and in European mid-markets. And the firm even produces a regular European buy and build report to cover these activities, which tells a bit about how focused you were on these particular strategies. I must also stress that you were chairman of the BVCS, the UK Trade Association for Private Equity, until a few days ago. I understand a lady now to cover, right?
Yeah, after a year, they get rid of you, Antoine.
And last, I may mention a few deals or platforms that are currently active at Silverfleet. For example, Colexia Finance Service, so a Denmark-based financial service business, or Prefer Resins, for example, an industrial business. So good to have you, Neil, and to listen to your experience in this matter. AJ, good morning or good afternoon.
Hello, Antoine.
So AJ Rohde, to introduce you, you're senior partner at Thoma Bravo, which is a San Francisco and Chicago-based fund manager with over 70 billion under management. The firm is exclusively specializing on software businesses, and one of the most active sponsors in this industry, investing obviously in the US, but internationally as well, with its own buy and build strategy, which is also part of your DNA. And I must also add that you joined Thoma Bravo in 2010, and that you launched and built the Discover Fund series within the firm.
Yes. Yep.
And our third speaker, Nicolas. Hi, Nicolas.
Hello, Antoine. Hello, everyone. Pleased to be here.
So Nicolas N.Darnaud, based in Paris, managing director at Ardian, part of the working with the French and European buyout team. Nicolas, you're also one of the most active acquirer within the firm, because you led several of the buy and build platforms at Ardian in Europe, especially Kersia, which was a very successful one, exited to IK Investment a few months ago. But also there are some other very active acquirers at the moment in your portfolio. I can mention Santé Compagnie in the home care business, as well as Innovi or Prosol, which is known as Grand Frais by consumers. So it's great to have the three of you in three different geographies and with much experience and expertise to discuss buy and build. Perhaps let's start with a question or a point that you made when we prepared this talk, Neil, is that corporates are quite poor acquirer. They are not typically praised for creating value, and they enter into large M&A, whereas private equity has a strong and proven track record of creating value in these strategies. Why that? How do you think private equity has an edge when it comes to buy and build?
It's a very good question, and at the moment, it's being investigated by a number of academics. So John Gilligan and Tim Galpin, who are in the finance lab at the Side Business School, are actually looking at this very question. And I think Invest Europe is doing a survey of all of their members to see if they can find some data to start to shed light on why. I think it's fair to say the fact that corporates generally don't get this right is fairly well established. There is quite a lot of research on this. Boston Consulting Group, for example, did a survey of, I think, 19,000 corporate bolt-ons and showed that the vast majority were value destructive. And in my dim and distant past, I used to be a Bain & Company consultant, and we did the same sort of work. We came to the same conclusions. And it used to be the case on the London stock market that the minute a company announced they were buying something in the US, that it was immediate sell sign, just dump the stock, get out real fast, because nothing good will happen after this. So corporates aren't very good. On the other side, it appears that LPs like buy and build. And if LPs like it, it probably means it's producing returns. My guess is that it's a combination of the experience of the GP, and what we can bring to the picture is basically telling management which ones they should leave alone, don't do it. Management always like M&A, it's nice and exciting, and it's more fun than running the business day to day. But sometimes they get carried away and they need people like us to go, no, it's too expensive, or it's in the wrong place, or it's the wrong time. And then again, the management teams who've done several buy and build deals, they have the experience, they kind of know how to do the integration. And I think the main thing is they value the people. So I'm sure we'll come back to this, but I think valuing the people, the software in the deal is much more important than the hardware.
Yeah.
What are your views, AJ, in the software industry? Because the software giants are also, you know, very aggressive acquirer. Are they better, or are you better than them?
No, it's the same. It's actually probably worse, frankly. You know, and I'll echo what Neil said, and maybe add a point. There's also the concept of ownership. You know, in a big corporate, no one owns the acquisition. In you know, private equity-backed company, there's the CEO is the owner. He or she is close enough to it. There's a business unit owner. There's P&L responsibility that follows through after the acquisition. In technology, you know, people are used to working at a tech company for 2 years, 3 years. That's their whole career, right? It's a fluid job market, very competitive, very fast moving. And so you put those folks into a corporate acquisition, which is going to be generally very expensive. The mobility is already there. It's ingrained into their brains. So, and these are IP-based businesses. They don't have any real hard assets. The assets are people. So people leave or walk out the door, the value of the acquisition goes away. And that's going to happen naturally because of how fluid these job markets are. And then it gets exacerbated by the being subsumed into a big company. Most people who want to work at a tech company don't want to work at a bureaucratic, layered, structured enterprise. And, you know, say what you will, but that's what Google and Amazon, I mean, that's what they've become, right? And so at the end of the day, it's just the realities of the tech job market put into a blender. And that's, I think, why most of those acquisitions haven't worked either.
Nicolas, why do you think Ardian is a better acquirer than most corporates?
So you know, I fully agree on the human capital. You may have the best opportunity, the best rationale, the best equity story. What will make the difference is your human capital, the people that you have, the team that you have. And I agree that you need a strong complementarity between the GPs. and the manager for sure, and this is the key of the success. In a way, I am very happy when we are doing a build-up, because we combine the best of two worlds. The world of our manager, which are the expert, the knowledge of the industry and the potential of implementing the synergies between two business, and the world of the private equity, which is a very experienced, we leverage our network, our track record in terms of M&A. As you did in our portfolio, 80% of our company are doing buy and build, and 1/3 transformational buy and build. So that for sure, it's always a great opportunity to do buy and build. And on top of that, if I compare to the corporate, I believe, and we strongly believe, that in the private equity, we have good instruments to align interest. You know, at the end, we have good incentive to motivate people. They are owner of their business, and when you believe that there is a value creation potential and you put in place the good incentive, it already is the first key milestone for a success in your M&A strategy.
Which leads us also to the value creation. How do you the human capital is quite intangible, but there are more operational and very operational levers to use. What is your value add as GPs? What are the operational factors that you use to create value at a portfolio level in buy and builds?
Who do you want to answer that one, Antoine? Shall I have a go?
I don't know, Neil, you can get it, yeah?
I think it goes back to how you run teams and how you integrate people into teams so that they don't do what AJ just said, which is go straight to look for the next job the minute the deal's happened. And I think that goes back to Nicolas' comment as well. You know, we generally try to bring the key people into the equity if you can, or make sure that they feel that they're owners in some way economically. And then the next bit is about integrating people really into the team, so that they feel part of a bigger enterprise that's going forward, has a purpose, has a mission, has clarity as to what it's trying to achieve. Many corporates, they kind of say all that, but it doesn't really happen. And it goes back to that sort of who's actually driving it, who owns it, who's basically responsible for that deal. It's very clear in most PE-backed companies that this is the management team's deal, and it needs to work. So it's a combination of hard skills, soft skills, planning, having a value creation plan that is clear and understood right from the beginning. So I think it's a combination of factors, Antoine.
In the software business, is it different, or are there different ways?
No, it's the same. One thing we do as a firm, which I love, is we have pre-agreed upon targets for every investment, and the performance equity of our management teams vests on those targets that we pre-agree upon, and that includes the acquisitions. So every time we make an acquisition, we re-agree on 4 years of targets. Those acquired numbers get layered into the base numbers. We amend every single person's equity agreement, and then we keep doing that every time we make an acquisition. It's a bit of an administrative burden, but the incentives are so well aligned because half of your equity is time, half is performance. Performance is, hey, are we all agreeing to this? Okay, what are the numbers? Okay, and they basically are written in Sanskrit on the walls of the company, and then we can go march to that plan operationally by doing that. And so it's just, we try to provide clarity by, very simple set of numbers. Usually for us, it lines back to EBITDA, 4 years of EBITDA that we all agree upon on the acquired companies.
And how do you identify future targets? And perhaps let's start with the original deal. Do you have like a top-down approach where you identify, especially in the software business for you, AJ, some particular industries that need to be digitalized, or is it more of a bottom-up approach? You have the good target, the good management, and then around them buy new businesses?
I'll be brief. We have created, if you've seen the movie Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield, he does the triple Indy off the diving board where he flips like 3 times and lands on a bunch of different diving boards. We have coined this phrase, the triple Indy, but in my business, we've done 9 of these. where we've done a simultaneous combination of two companies at once. So bilateral negotiations where we back number one to buy number two in a market, or we back number two to buy number one in a market, and we merge them concurrently to form a new platform company at the start. Versus, we still like the platform investing, platform and tuck-ins, but oftentimes I found it's more valuable to create the category killing company in a lab, if you will, if you can. And so we have done this number of times. That is very disruptive, very difficult culturally, because you're bringing two companies together at once. They don't know each other. How are you going to make the products work? But then you can really spend the next year to a year and a half integrating them and spending time. And if you've built a company up that has enough relative market share and pricing power and brand power, we can take that risk. And so our solution to what you just said, Antoine, is we've tried to go hyperscale with it really fast. And when I say really fast, I mean the first day we own the company. And that has become an enormously great alpha generator for us. It's not without heartburn or without risk, clearly. And you have to find the right teams prepared for that journey. But that's something that's an innovation we've tried to capitalize on in the last 3 or 4 years.
That's an interesting point you're making, AJ. Nicolas, do you also prefer mergers of peers, or let's say businesses that are very complementary and of the same scale, or do you also like the platform that's buying smaller pieces of a business?
Oh, we did both. We are pragmatic. We are not dogmatic. We did some transformational acquisition. The most obvious one is a deal that we did in Spain a few years ago, on which we did at the first closing, the merge of two peers to create one of the leaders in the market in the bakery business. That is an example. But I have a lot of examples in our portfolio transforming acquisition only a few months after we entering the business, because when we go for the initial investment, usually we did a very full screening of the market, and we know very well the competitive environment, and we identified a lot of potential acquisition before doing the deal. I have not in mind any acquisition or recent acquisition on which we have not in our investment memorandum already a pipe of potential M&A to be performed. You mentioned initially Kersia, I think it's a good example because just a few, not only 1 year after the initial closing, we did a transforming acquisition in Germany to double the size of the business. And it's a business in 4 years on which we did 6 add-on, a small one and big one, in order to transform a national champion into a global leader. So that means that we are pragmatic and we are happy to do both, but for sure it's important to be very professionalized in each step, to have a very strong post-merger integration process in place and to execute very properly the strategy.
When we prepared this call, Nicolas, you told me that the multiple arbitrage, what we call in French in martingale, was probably over, and it was now all about building strategic value when growing businesses through M&A. Can you elaborate on that? What do you think is strategic value? And we'd like also to hear the comment of the others about that.
Yeah, sure. I can jump on that. And but first, Antoine, I agree with you on the fact that we cannot speak about martingale. I don't think that is true to say that there is a martingale. But it's true that by doing acquisition, we can decrease our entry multiple if you do acquisition with a lot of synergies, because you decrease the average multiple of the combined group thanks to the synergies. And on the other hand, and this will sustain the value and the value creation. And on the other hand, may be more offensive and create strategic value and increase the exit multiple. Let's say, I think that the best is to have both. And to increase the strategic value usually is to have a new opportunity to develop your business. It could be through internationalization, new business diversification, new go-to-market, or upstream, downstream integration. And synergies could be more financial skills on which you have purchasing or industrial synergies when you had to do so. But as for example, you mentioned the activity that we have in the home care, on which we entered last year, just at the beginning of the pandemic, and 3 months later, we did a significant and transforming move in Germany to internationalize the business and also to develop a new business services in the chemotherapy at home. And in such a case, you do both. You internationalize, you diversify your expertise, and you have new growth prospect. And as such, you will sustain the exit multiple of this business, thanks to the increase of strategic value.
Neil, did you see some trends over the years, new ways of conducting this type of deals?
To be honest, not really. The basics are pretty much the same. But going to your question to Nicolas, a lot of people think that the value creation comes from the multiple arbitrage between, buying something small and then exiting. It's actually not really the case. It adds a little bit, but it's far better if you can significantly increase the growth rate. So, one example, one of our French companies bought a business in Turkey that's a specialist in aluminium surface treatment. Guess what? Tesla is now one of their customers. They wouldn't have got Tesla from Istanbul. They got Tesla because the French company has a significant subsidiary in the US, and that's how it sells into Tesla. That accelerates growth globally. That is much more accretive. We've got another one, same company, but we bought a specialist lubricants business in southern Germany, up to the point where we became investors. They had a German website, and we got, some American customers came to us and said, how do we buy this company's products? We don't speak German. So we thought, well, maybe this is a good opportunity. And then you take that product line, and now, we've hired salespeople in China to sell that product in China. It's going great. So those are the things where it's a real win-win. You're bringing sort of niche technology to the world. And I suspect that probably works in software as well, AJ.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, AJ, how does buy and build, expand top line growth in software businesses?
So software, oftentimes we always say you can't fix product, which is true, but you can certainly fix distribution. And software, most of our best CEOs they do buy and build really well, and they sell really well. And software, oftentimes outside of its core market, is sold through channel partners or distributors. And a lot of our M&A oftentimes is to access a distribution network that is really successful. We own a company that all of its sales are done through the Microsoft channel. And so that's a really powerful distribution arm, right? There are companies that serve Autodesk, heavily channel, Salesforce, heavily channel. And so we try to find through M&A, there are always these industry leaders or customer-focused leaders in these geographies. If you can buy access to those because they sell another vendor you want to acquire, that's actually really powerful, because software, most of our companies have 98, 97, 96% retention rates. So that's the cost of trying to rip out that other vendor's software. If I can buy that software or buy a channel partner that already has that relationship, it's 10 times faster to access those customers than it would be for me to try to build a channel myself or hire salespeople myself or that sort of thing. So that's a hugely beneficial thing in software.
And AJ, you're working in a market that is quite homogeneous, large and culturally quite homogeneous market. What are your views on Europe? Do you think it's complicated to conduct build-ups as you're doing in the US, in Europe?
One thing we've done really well as a firm is keep the growth while optimizing the EBITDA margins. So really using the operational bootstrapping concept to really get the companies growing faster without adding any expense. Most software companies are way overbuilt from the start. And so oftentimes that first step is a pretty significant refocus of products and people that then come with those products. I do find sometimes for us in Europe, it's a little harder with the Workers' Council and some of the things to affect some of those changes faster, depending on what country you're talking about. And you know, we've tended to make most of our money in 3-year windows, 3-year increments. And again, if we're doing hardcore operational change in year 1, you know, that could be a little bit slower. I think the buy and build in Europe is actually better than it is in the United States. The markets are fragmented. There's still the consolidation opportunity that exists in many European software areas that does not exist anymore in the US. So we love that. We just have to orient ourselves a little more around patience, speed with the upfront maneuvers that we're used to, because we operate in a very American kind of, yeah, let's go and this and that. And it does, that's not going to work in certain cases. And so we've done a number of platforms in Europe. We've had to learn to be a little more culturally sensitive about speed and expectations and pace. Once we get there, then we can do everything we want. And that's been wonderful. So we really do want another frontier in Europe, but you know, it's competitive there too. There's some wonderful firms that do well in software there too. So we'd be the new entrant. So, and we're a very lean team, so we'd have to figure that out. But we have big ambitions, especially starting with the UK.
Yeah. Nicolas, how would you comment on this cultural aspect in Europe? Ardian is as Silverfleet actually is pretty active in international cross-border deals. How would you comment on this particular cultural aspect?
You know, I think first I believe that there are opportunity in whole market worldwide. That's great in our work and our job. But for sure, our mission is to identify the best target and the best opportunity. I really believe that having a global presence is an advantage, a strong advantage. But we need to be multi-local. And this probably, especially if I speak about Europe, we can see that we make the difference in our core geographies, in the buyout, for example, at Ardian in Europe, which are France, Germany, and Italy, because we have a very long presence in this territory. So that means that we know very well the business, we know very well all the entrepreneur, all the great trajectory, and we create the trust with the family. And that's great that despite the fact that we increase the size of our business, we continue to source the primary business in our country, but having the global, let's say, view and potential to scale up a business, a national champion, into a European leader or a worldwide leader is key. So I need the network that we have to leverage the questions, the experience, our approach to a business. And after, I need to be multi-local to source, to create the trust, and to have the management with us. So that's key. That's key, I think, in our competitive advantage as of today in our market. Yeah.
Neil, you also have boots on the ground in Europe. Do you think there's a cultural also aspect in these strategies?
There is for sure, Antoine. I mean, somebody once told me that the GDP of Denmark is about the same as the greater Baltimore area. So why would you have a Baltimore specialized fund, but you'd have specialized funds? And there's a reason, and that's because the laws are different, the language is different. There is a slight cultural difference even from Denmark to the other Nordic countries, and it'll take you longer. You know, it will just add years to your strategy to try and enter that market without having. So it's easier basically to buy a small company, bring the management on side, they bring their contacts, networks, client base, etc. It just accelerates. And private equity doesn't have the luxury of time. So I think that's why buy and build across Europe is pretty active. It accelerates the speed of development.
Yeah.
We started the discussion comparing corporate and private equity. Do you think that now that buy and build has been around for a while, there is I would say, a breed of managers that is now used to buy and build and ready to jump in and build platform? Is it your case, for example, AJ in the software business?
Yeah, I think it's by necessity too, to some degree. It's really hard for people to make returns now, paying 11, 12, 13 times revenue for software that grows 10 to 20% a year. To make that math work, you can't get there with just simply organic growth or just simply EBITDA margin. You have to acquire. And so I think a lot of the market in software has been thrust into the buy and build as a requisite to literally make returns. And I even find that with our business, we used to make great money just on our improvement of the business, faster growth, higher margin, that sort of thing. But again, we're looking at returns now in a base case without M&A that are very on the edge, even with the most ambitious of those programs. So we have to do that. And fortunately, most of the things we look at have, to Nicolas' point, a lot of targets, and that's the point. But we've probably over-indexed now, or are over-indexing now to buy and build strategy, because that strategy is now the required strategy to make our base case returns, whereas before it might not have been as much.
Does any of you have a good example of top-level managers and why they were different to conduct such strategies? Why they were the right guys to conduct these buy and build strategies? Do you have some example in mind?
Well, Antoine, I'd say the one thing you need to remember here is a lot of investors are very skeptical about secondary and tertiary buyouts, but a manager in a secondary and a tertiary buyout has a hell of a lot more experience about doing bolt-ons and add-ons than the guy in the primary deal, because he probably wasn't allowed to at his corporate, or the family wouldn't back him, or whatever the reason was. Because this is one of the mysteries: why do secondary buyouts make money? Why is it, when all the low-hanging fruit has been picked, that you still make great returns? And I think that's where you find the benefit of experience, and experience is really the key to getting bolt-ons to really work. And we backed a lot of people over the years in secondary and tertiary deals who have done very well, because they know exactly which deals they want. They cultivated those leads for a long time. They know the company and the owner very well, and then it's a question of execution. And I won't pick specific individuals, but I can probably list 10 if I sat down and wrote it.
What about you, Nicolas?
I fully agree that when you are on the secondary, if I take an example, the deal that we have in the home care, it was a secondary, and we enter in a business on which there is already a M&A department, well-structured, ability to do M&A and buy and build. You have to pay a premium when you enter in a business on which you are already the skill available, because you know that you will have further growth. You will do your organic, and on top of that, you will have all the M&A. By the way, we also do in a primary, we mentioned Kersia, on which when we enter, we have no M&A department. It was a standalone business or a carve out of a family business. No one acquisition during all the life of the business, and after we set up an M&A team, we did 6 acquisitions, and by at the end of our investment, they were plug and play. They wanted to do more build up than us at Ardian, and that's great, because at least in terms of value, at the end, the next buyer know that he has a strong M&A team in place that they will develop the business. And to jump on the comment on the fact that on some business you need to do M&A. For example, I have also a company that we closed 1 month ago. It's active in the medical biology in France, and we know that it's a very resilient but a small growth market. I put just a carve out on the current situation with a lot of business that they have due to the pandemic and the COVID. So that means that you need to consolidate the business and to do buy and build. And as such, you know that there is still a market which is fragmented, and you need to have the skills inside the company to do such integration, such M&A. For sure, after we have to work alongside them at the beginning. It's part of the value creation which is given by the GP to put people, resources, not only financial resources, but all the skills in terms of PMI, integration plan, ability to execute, ability at a moment of time to jump on an acquisition and to do it and to strike this acquisition. But I agree that in a way, when I enter in the secondary, when already M&A platform in place, it's easier.
Yeah.
So I would say that they are the best manager because they are already trained. So I try to do primary and to train the manager, and after they are ready to do the M&A only without our support.
AJ,
is your typical target structured this way as well?
Yeah, well, what's funny now, I was going to comment on Nicolas' point too. Those teams are so rare now that you see it. This is probably relevant to other academic work you've done, Antoine. Sponsors are just rolling. They're selling part of the company to another sponsor because that team that can do buy and build is very special. So they stay in, and then 3 years later, that group sells another third to some other sponsor. So we have a lot of deals in software now in our industry in the US. There's like 5 sponsors in the deal, because over the last 6 years, it was like selling minority stake to one. And it was all because that company was such an M&A machine leading its market. The CEO and his team or her team, they realize they have a tiger by the tail, so they just want to keep going and re-up and recash. And every sponsor wants to come in because that's such a unique competency. And so you're seeing more and more of that. They're partnership deals, but they didn't start that way. People just want to keep compounding their returns into this engine that works, you know.
Nicolas, you mentioned offensive or offensive and versus defensive build-ups. Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that?
Offensive, we mentioned the example of the first move that we did with Kersia in Germany, or the transforming move that we did as well with Santé Company. Defensive, sometimes it could be also important when you enter a business on which you are, let's say, maybe too focused on an industry on which you potentially you want to diversify the business. Sometimes, even if it is not our first criteria to invest in a business, it's not enough. It's not, a must. But sometimes you may have opportunity to look at a business in order to diversify your business, to diversify your portfolio of clients, to diversify your geography, your product, in order potentially, if you have lower growth in a business, or if you experience a cyclical downgrade in one geographies or one business, potentially you reinforce the value of the business. So that's why, unfortunately, we have all in our portfolio, in our experience, sometimes an industry that are not the trajectory that was expected. But thanks to the fact that we did some M&A, we have been better versus the competition, and especially also for the one that maybe have to monitor a company currently that are not in a very good shape in their industry. I believe that is very important to continue to look for buy and build, to reinforce your key differentiating factor, to create synergies, to be smart, and potentially when you will have the catch up, you will create value.
Niels, some comments on this?
Well, I mean, I've just been thinking while we were talking, we shouldn't let any viewers go away with the thinking that buy and build's the answer to every problem. It's really important to know that you should never buy something where the culture, say in a service company, is very different to the culture of your company. The guys at Ardian will remember a business that we also invested in. It was a company called CCC, which was in the call center business. We looked for acquisitions, and everything was very old style. The culture was terrible, and in the end, that business was developed by rollouts of new centers, so that you preserved the culture. You had new thinking, new technology. When they went to support Facebook, they set up a facility in Madrid, and they recruited thousands of people, rather than try to buy something which would have been an integration nightmare. So we should just say buy and build is appropriate in many cases, but not all cases. So please don't go away thinking this is the solution to everything. It isn't.
I agree on the fact that for sure one of the most common, let's say, on our side, the failure that we have experienced is exactly the human rationale is the first and always the reason of the failure. So that's why I have example of some very nice, very strong opportunities on the paper that can create a lot of value, on which finally we have declined because in terms of cultural fit, complementarities, common DNA, it was a prerequisite, and they were not at all on the same page. In a way, it's a pity, because if you just look at the potential of the combined group in terms of presence, in terms of product, in terms of go-to-market, it's a fantastic story on the paper. But after you have to manage the people, it's probably one of the most difficult topics that we have to do. Sometimes it's important to say no. We cannot do it.
AJ, some memories as well of deals you declined.
Oh yeah.
For some reason.
Yeah. we like growth, organic revenue growth, and oftentimes the ones we miss, or the buy and build ones we miss, is because the buy and build is a profit machine but not a growth machine. And in software, that just, it's still hard. It's hard to sell and get premium value unless you've got good growth. I don't care what scale you are. And so to Neil's point, oftentimes we're on the razor's edge between, it's probably better just to let this thing stay clean and invest in growth and keep growing than to muck it up. We debate this often. And that's become even more true now that growth tends to be more highly valued than profits. I don't think that'll always be true. Over the last 100 years, most of the time that's not true, but for right now, it might be. And so we are very careful of that. So we have like almost two sourcing types of deals. We have the growth deals where we're going to invest more in them. And then we have the buy and build deals where it's the same concept, but the alpha comes more from the M&A. And we tend to think of those as separate, almost like separate sourcing pipelines, if you will.
Nicola, I think you were right.
We have a question from the audience, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, we have a question from the audience. So I read the question. When do you decide to cut losses if the EBITDA targets consistently do not get achieved, and what does the exit strategy look like at that stage?
Do
you want that?
Antoine, should I go?
Yeah, you can go.
Go for it.
The first thing you have to understand is why haven't you hit your EBITDA target? It may be very simple, and the fix could be very simple. It could in fact just be down to changing the CEO, or it could be a market issue, or it could be competitor activity, or it could be your sales guys aren't putting up the prices that they need to put up, or your conversion rates aren't good enough, or whatever. So before you come to any conclusions, you have to understand the problem and figure out what the correct fix is. And sometimes those will come back on track and may well be great deals.
Nicola, AJ, you want to comment?
No, 100% agree.
Is there another question in the room?
No, that's all.
So, okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I think, Nicola, you were absolutely right. I was mistaken when I said martingale. It appears to be quite complex to lead buy and build strategies, especially for the human factor that we took quite some time to comment on. So thank you very much. Have all a good day or end of day for the Europeans. And I leave the mic to the organization for the next step.
Merci, Antoine.
Thank you. Merci, Antoine.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.